Yo, this is Bench Gamer here. So I've already watched all of the version 3.3 special program. I'm not going to react to it live because frankly I don't enjoy most of it that much. I don't usually tend to enjoy the vast majority of the version programs because they tend to go long for too long or too short, and things that I'm interested in are not there for the most part. Obviously, we're going to get Scaramouche and Faruzan in the future. I already save up all of my resources just to level up a Scaramouche, and I'm definitely going to pull for him. I've guaranteed on him, so that's very interesting, but obviously that's all standard fare. We get new characters every single patch, or at least it seems to in Sumeru. Inazuma had a dead patch of just all reruns after Raiden Shogun, so I think they're trying to avoid that in Sumeru, and that's pretty cool. But obviously, the main feature for this version is going to be the Genius Invocation TCG, and that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Just a bit of a rant. In every single language other than English, and I think like two other random languages like German and Indonesian, every single other language, including the original in Chinese, calls this card game Summoning of the Seven Saints, which I assume to be like some kind of reference to the Archons. But for whatever reason, they changed it to Genius Invocation TCG in English and German and Indonesian, I think. And that's probably to just make it more obvious that this is a card game, if the fact that, the screenshot that you're seeing here is not already making it obvious with the splash art. They just want to call it Genius Invocation TCG because I think that's what every single other card game calls it, which isn't really even true. This name is a misnomer. This is a lie because it's not a trading card game. You cannot trade cards in this game. You will see later on that the way you get more cards is by like battling NPCs, and that progresses your character roster, and then you can get points and coins that you can spend on other cards. So it's a bit more similar to something like a Marvel Snap, where you progress by doing like your dailies, and you get points that you put towards leveling up your character, and then you get more cards. I think it's a bit better than Marvel Snap, because Marvel Snap has this annoying thing where you don't really get to know what cards you're getting until you level up to that certain level. So potentially, if you really wanted to just get, I don't know, one single character, you don't actually know where that character card is in terms of your leveling system. It might be like level 369 that you get your card in, or it might be level 10, I don't know. But in this game, as you will see later on, is that there is just a shop and you can spend your points on whatever card you want. So that's pretty interesting. The Genius Invocation TCG is an okay name. It just means, it's trying to describe what they want you to think about this game. Anyways, I think one of the interesting things about this reveal is that some people, quite a few people, have become more excited about it, because I think one of the fears at first when they showed it in version 3.0 is that this would just be scuffed Hearthstone or stuffed, I don't know, Magic the Gathering Arena, or even, I don't know, Pokemon. I've never actually played Pokemon because I was poor as fuck as a kid, and I don't really enjoy, spending money on things that I will never actually get to play with another person. I don't really like collecting things that way. And it apparently doesn't. I've never noticed that it had an online version of the game, so it just kind of fell off my radar. But I have seen people compare this game to Pokemon, because you spend like dices or certain points of elemental power to activate your characters, and that's how you deal damage in this game. But for whatever reason, people seem to be more interested in this game now, and I think a big part of that is just that this game, they're seeing more of it. I think there's also an aspect where this game mirrors a lot of the stuff you already do in the game itself in terms of combat mechanics. I'll get back to that later on. So let's just watch this, and I'll stop when I see something interesting.
House is about to release a hit light novel series based on Genius Invocation TCG.
Okay, now this is starting to sound like a plug for Yaya Publishing House.
Maybe. But anyway, that's the legend on how...
Okay, so going back to the fact that people are more interested, rant number 2, I think it might be a bit of an overcorrection to get more excited about this game than you were initially, because I still don't think we've seen enough or know enough about the game, unless you've looked at leaks, to really have a good idea of where this game is going to be like 2 weeks after the release of the game, because we don't know how the economy of the game works. We don't know how fast or how efficiently you're going to be able to like collect cards, or whether or not there will be enough cards to keep you interested. My fear is that because this is this is the first card game that MiHoYo has ever made, right? There might not be enough content in the initial release of the card game to keep people interested for more than like 2 weeks. So there is a possibility that it will fall off quite soon after release. I hope it's not going to, but that is a distinct possibility. There's also the fact that even though this game seems more complicated than it did at first, again, people probably thought that this would just be scuffed Hearthstone. We still don't know enough about the mechanics of the game to really say whether or not this game will have a lasting impact. One of the things that I didn't like about Hearthstone was that it was very static, or at least it was when I played, and there was not really that much interaction between the players between turns. And I fear that that might be the case with Genius Invocation TCG as well, where you're kind of just doing your thing on your turns and there's no like feedback or interaction with the other players. Or maybe that won't really matter because, you know, this game is supposed to be casual and you're not supposed to think too much about it. So in terms of where the complexity lies, I have to suspect that it's going to be somewhere between Hearthstone and like, I don't know, Marvel Snap. But it doesn't really have any like, it doesn't really tell you, even if it is complex, whether or not it will be fun. Some games are complex, but that itself does not make it fun, if you get what I mean. Anyways, back to the game. Or
Genius Invocation TCG came to be, though it's probably just a story they came up with for marketing the game.
So while you were telling us about the story, I was over here researching the rules to the game. Basically, Genius Invocation TCG...
Okay, this is kind of interesting, which is that they are talking to an NPC that already existed in the game to get a duel. So you're going to be able to duel NPC characters in this game, and I think that's the primary way in which you are going to progress your character and get more points and coins to buy cards. The reason why I find this interesting is that my first impression was that we would be dueling these NPC characters, which we already knew we were going to be doing. I thought we were going to be dueling them in like a domain or like a permanent domain, just like the teapot, where all of these characters are gathered, maybe like around a few desks, and then we would go like sit next to them and then talk to them, and then we would be able to deal with them. And then there would be like some NPCs, special NPCs that not NPCs, but just playable characters that would be there, and then we would be able to talk to them, and then, you know, a duel happens. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Furuya Noboru is already an NPC that exists in the game, which is great because they're making use of older assets. If it weren't for this feature, this duel feature that we're going to be getting in the next patch, like realistically, I would never go back and talk to any of these people. I already don't talk to any of the NPCs already. The only reason I would ever talk to these people is because I want like free stuff. Because when you go to a new region, the new NPCs sometimes have a dialogue option that gives you free stuff. And not even that is enough to get me to talk to them sometimes. So it's good that they're making use of new NPCs. On the other hand, is there like any indication that this NPC would be a duelable character? Or is this like some kind of quest and that's how you know? Because I don't see anything on the minimap that would indicate that this is a duelable character. And there's nothing on the screen itself in the open world that also says that this is a duelable character. So I wonder how you're going to be able to tell that, you know, you can duel these NPCs, or are they so common that you can literally just talk to anybody that's an NPC and then they're like, yeah, I have a duelable deck, you want to duel? So that's just something
I was over here researching the rules to the game. Basically, Genius Invocation TCG is a game where you use a constructed...
So duel Furuya Noboru stage introduction. With the way he approaches matches with seamless meticulousness, catching opponents' vulnerabilities before launching counterattacks, Furuya Noboru is to newbies as a towering wall to climb special rule. When action phase begins, the active character on both sides will be affected by Electro. Right, so if you look at the special rule here, you are going to be able to apply elements to enemy characters. Each side begins with like 3 character cards. I'm not sure if the 3 character cards is like mandatory, but would you want to have 2 character cards or like only 1 character card? Anyways, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but essentially what the special rule and the fact that you can apply elements to enemy characters, the reason why this is good is that they're taking mechanics that already exist in the game that you already do with like actual combat and transporting them over to the card game itself. So this game is going to be very easy to understand from a mechanics or like lore standpoint compared to, I don't know, unless if you're just going into an MTG arena or a Hearthstone game where a lot of the mechanics don't really have any relationship to to like the MMO, or there's no game that MTG Arena is based off of, so it's a bit harder to onboard people to those games. Not specifically Hearthstone. I probably shouldn't have said Hearthstone, but that's just something I find really good that they're doing, and it's a very smart way of making people not get alienated by the rules of the game that might seem more complicated than they really are. And there's also challenge objectives and your active deck, which I suppose means that you're going to be able to build a deck that's pretty obvious. Opposing lineup. So you're going to be able to see what characters they're using. It's a bit like Spiral Abyss in that way, where you have objectives that you can do and then you get rewards for it. I think this card thing, this 240 here, probably indicates that your character level, whereas the 250 is the coins you're going to be earning so that you can buy more cards that you will see later on. So yeah, opposing lineup, this is very similar to Spiral Abyss and all the events we do in the combat.
The deck of cards to duel against
Achieve victory within 6 rounds, trigger 2 elemental reactions, 500, 500, 250. You'll see later on that you can spend these points on not only cards, but like burst animations, and a burst animation is like worth 4,000 coins, I believe. So you're going to have to do like 3 of these NPCs just to get 1 burst animation, which is fine for a card game in terms of economy. But I wonder if there's like a limit to how many of these coins you can get, depending on what patch it is. Like, my fear is that in one patch, in the initial release, there's not going to be enough NPCs for you to get everything in the game. Like, if you need to battle an NPC at least 4 times to get these objectives, to get more than 4,000 coins, and that's only 1 burst animation, are these going to be repeatable? Are there going to be different difficulties for this character, for this NPC? Or are there just so many NPCs that it doesn't really matter? So that's one of the worries I have, which is that they will artificially gimp you in terms of how many of these burst animations or cards you can get, just because there's not going to be enough coins that you can earn in the game itself to get all of the cards you want.
An opponent. The objective...
Right, so 3 characters on each side. Don't know if this is mandatory. Traveler versus Furyo Noboru. When different elements that can trigger an elemental reaction are applied to the same character card, an elemental reaction will occur. Very similar to the actual combat itself, very good. These cards have different frames compared to these cards. I don't know if that's like a special card frame or a card back that you can earn, or if it just indicates that this is the player deck versus the gray one, which is like the NPC deck. Not sure if that's a thing, but we can see that these character combinations do have elemental synergy to them. Sino goes with like Dendro, because Electro, Dendro, and Hydro. You can also have non-playable characters as card characters in this game, like Magu Kenki. I don't know what he does, but Official is obviously supports normal attacks, and that goes with Yoimiya, so that makes sense.
Is to defeat all of your opponent's characters.
And you can see on the right-hand side that you spend like 8 dices, which correspond with elemental reaction elements in the game. This is an anomaly element they'll explain later on, but essentially what you have to do is that you have an active character on your side of the board. I think there can be only 1 active character at the same time, and then you spend these stars here. I don't know how you get them, and I don't think they explain it, but you can spend these 3 stars here that correspond with the burst info box here. So Starward Sword, you spent 4 electro element and 3 stars to trigger elemental burst, deals 4 electro damage, deals 3 piercing damage to all standby characters on all opposing characters on standby. So that's why this Hydro Gunner is getting dealt -4 damage, whereas this shielded character, you can see that in the bottom left that there's one shield, is getting dealt -3 damage. Whereas I don't think it damages the shield at all. So that's really interesting, because obviously they're not going to have the same abilities as in the game. In the game itself, in the combat, Kuchin cannot go through shields, I think. I don't know. Is that actually a thing? It's probably not. And yeah, you're seeing some of the cards that aren't playable characters. I think that's really cool, because in the future we might be able to play as like Ajdaha, maybe. We might be able to play as, I don't know, like the Raiden Shogun in her Archon form. That could be a card that could be really cool. But obviously these cards are pretty much just mobs right now, and we're going to see like Helichos and all this bullshit. I don't know why he has a shield though. Like, he doesn't have a shield in the game itself.
Cards.
That's right.
Also, there are many features and mechanics in the game.
Right, so this is the burst animation that you will have to buy. Not all of the cards are going to have these. You're going to actually have to choose which burst animation to buy. And I haven't seen a burst animation yet. Actually, I think we will see one later on where they do a burst animation. It doesn't have this thing going on. It's just like a simple attack, just like Hearthstone. So that's a tiny bit disappointing because it's like you're going to have to invest in a deck before it gets like spiffed out. You're going to have to choose whether or not you want to spend those coins on more cards, or if you just want to, you know, spend them on burst animation, which is kind of, it's their artificial way of making sure that you don't get access to all of the abilities at first. You're going to have to invest in a specific deck that you want to make look cool, versus whether or not you just want more cards. I'm pretty sure that the coins that they use for the burst animations and cards are the same currency.
That resonate with Genshin Impact's gameplay, so it
Another interesting thing is that you deal elements to cards regardless of whether or not they have a shield. So this guy has a shield, but he still gets dealt elemental, you know, they get elements applied to them regardless of whether or not they're shielded or not.
shouldn't be too hard for players to get the hang of.
Another interesting thing is that non-playable characters get elemental burst now. Look at this.
So it shouldn't be too hard for players.
Elemental buff, Hydro, elemental burst. So does that mean that we're going to be able to buy burst animations for these cards as well? Like, what exactly does an elemental burst for a Hydro Counter look like? Just wondering.
To get the hang of.
Right, I even saw some.
And then they get 2 shield added to them. So maybe the fact that this Fatui agent has a shield is actually a buff from the Hydro Gunner.
Mental reactions in the gameplay.
Yup, a constructed deck must contain character cards.
Another thing I've noticed that every single card starts with 10 health. I'm not sure if I like this because it adds a bit of like formulaity. Is that the word? It makes it more formulaic, where all of the cards just start with the same stats. Obviously, there's some variation here. Some of the cards only need 3 bursts, 3 like activity points. I'm going to call these activity points. Whereas other cards only need 2 activity points. So 3, 3, 3, 2, 2, 2. I'm just looking at whether or not this game is going to be replayable, because that's one of the major things that will keep this game interesting going forwards, besides just more updates, which is that how many variations of the deck can you build? Or are there going to be like there's obviously going to be a meta, but is the meta going to be wide enough for us to play like different decks against each other? Or is the meta just going to be like, Friday National, or I don't know, just the national team on steroids?
And as you might expect, these character cards have a normal attack.
Right, so just going off of what I'm saying here,
And as you might expect, these character
you can
cards
see that you can equip equipments and put these on characters. There's like, I don't know what the hell this is, but this is probably a buff. These are probably events. There's like 3 types of cards, I believe. There's like events, there's equipment, and there's like activity. And all of these seem to cost something. These cost 2 dices, 1 and 0.
have a normal attack. And
There's also a timer on the side, which possibly means that this game will have like a timer, just like many other online card games, where you're not going to spend forever doing one thing, which is a really good thing, because fuck me if I have to wait another 1 minute, 1 to 2 minutes for somebody to finish their turn on Hearthstone.
these character
But also, this game is casual, so it doesn't really matter.
cards have a normal attack, an elemental skill.
And you press the button on the right-hand side, you can see it here. It's grayed out now, but this is essentially the burst button. This is essentially the activity button that will come up when that will represent the active ability of your active character.
Constructed deck.
So D-Luke is the active character right now, so this button is representing his elemental skill.
Must contain character cards. And as you might expect, these character cards have a normal attack, an
Elemental skill deals 3 pyro damage. Spend 3 pyro dice. For the third use of this skill each round, deal +2 damage for the third use of this skill each round. So apparently you're going to be able to do an elemental skill more than once, but apparently that's not possible here because they only have 3 pyro dice. There also seems to be a way to change some of these dices into other elements, but I'm not sure how yet. And you can see that here they have Electro and Pyro, which I assume is going to deal some kind of explosion.
Elemental skill, and an elemental burst.
That deals 5 damage. Was that the case previously?
A normal attack, an elemental
Deals 3 Pyro damage, but it actually deals 5 now. So you can see that the elemental reaction is doing extra damage. Or maybe that's the +2 from the third use of the skill.
skill, and an elemental burst. So when a
Overloaded.
character card deals
Wait.
So when a character
Opponent has switched to Yoimiya because of Overloaded. Why is that? No clue.
card deals elemental damage to an enemy, it will cause them to be affected by that element. Then, you can switch to a character card of a different element and use their abilities to trigger an elemental reaction.
Wait, did you guys notice that there are even monster character cards? Can we even make a deck of, like, just the monsters from the game?
And I assume that this red icon here is a buff of +2 attack, maybe? Because these seems to be buffs or status effects on the bottom left-hand side of the character cards.
Game?
You're really getting into this, Max.
And I assume that this is like a permanent buff on the field because this just flashed and you pulled 2 cards. And I assume that each round you only pull 1 card, so this is probably just a buff so that you can pull another card.
I am! I like card games!
Who doesn't?
So in Genius Invocation TCG, all actions require you to spend elemental dice. Each round, both you and your opponent will roll 8 elemental dice. Each of these elemental dice can have any one of 8 elemental attributes.
Right, so this is the way that this game is going to be more replayable, and this is how they're going to introduce an element of randomness and chance to this game beyond just whether or not you have meta decks, because eventually people are going to figure out what is the most optimal decks in this game. And if everybody has already figured that out, there's no way that you're going to get a fair match against another character once you figure that out. And this is just their way of introducing some level of randomness so that you're not just like raffle stomping every single round. There's going to be at least a chance that you'll lose, even if you're facing up against a character or another player that already has figured out the game. Obviously, it's not going to be like there are still obviously going to be ways where you mitigate this to the extent where you're always winning all of the time, but depending on how significant this is, it might increase or decrease the longevity of the game. If it's too random, then obviously it's not going to be a competitive game, but if it's not random enough, then it might just be another gimped attempt by MiHoYo to make this game less meta.
Hold on, but there's only 7 elements in the world of Teyvat.
You're right. So in addition to the 7
And it doesn't seem like there's anything to prevent you from rolling all of the dice. So you can re-roll any of the dice that you want. If you don't like the dice that you get, you can re-roll all of them.
standard elements, there's also one called the Omni element. The elemental dice required for a character
Yeah, and we know the Omni element is going to be the characters. The travelers in the in-game lore.
card to perform an action correspond to the character's element. So, for example, a pyro
Right. They just spent a card. Get there. And I assume that this is a card ability called Elemental Tuning,
character like
where
Diluc
they turned an Electro dice into a Pyro dice. So this seems to be a specific ability that a card has,
needs
rather
either
than a standard ability that every single deck is going to have.
pyro or Omni elemental dice
An elemental skill again spends an Omni element, which can like double as a Pyro element.
to perform an action. Clear now?
Yep, crystal clear.
Also, elemental dice can be used to switch characters.
After playing Chef Mao, after playing a food event card, create 1 random elemental dice. Again, more ways to affect your dice. What's it called? Your dice pool.
Or play a variety of other cards, such as equipment cards, event cards, and support cards. All these cards create the potential for a variety of strategies.
Right. While playing Genius Invocation TCG, travelers can earn player experience. which will increase your player level. As your level increases,
Player level. Player XP. So yes, this icon with the 2 cards represents player experience. Unlocked character cards, 4 out of 27. So the more cards you get. Wait, what does this mean? Unlocked character cards, 4 out of 27. Collected action cards, 40 out of 238. Open world match challenge objectives reached. Does it mean that you level up? Because I'm a bit confused, because does the player experience, this 1600, when you reach it, does it mean you get a bigger pool of character cards that you can unlock? Or does it mean that once you've unlocked these character cards, your experience increases? I don't know about this.
you'll be able to challenge more characters and NPCs. By completing challenges, you may earn lucky coins, new cards, or other rewards.
Primo gems. So yeah, you're going to... This is another way for you to like progress in the actual game. Besides just progressing in the card game, which is good because there has to be some... I like that they're adding tangible rewards besides just being able to play the game itself. Because obviously it sounds kind of bad, but not everybody is going to be interested in the card game. And I think this is a bet against the fact that this game might fall off, which is that they want some outside reward other than just playing the game for you to play the game. And I think that's a good thing.
Lucky coins.
And you can see that as you level up, you get more challenges.
Earn lucky coins, new cards.
New available players to challenge in Inazuma, new tavern challenges unlocked. And I think the tavern challenges is what I was getting at with the permanent domain, where I said that there will be more characters in there for you to fight. So that's probably going to be the equivalent of the tavern challenges, which is that you're going to be fighting against specific decks that have like gimmicks to them, or at least that's what I assume.
Or other rewards. Lucky coins can be...
These are cards that you can get with coins. So as we saw before, with the Inazuma NPC, you get 1,250 points or coins for completing all of the objectives. And one card costs 700 coins. Equipment cards, support cards. I don't know if all of the cards are going to cost the same. They're not. 500 coins, 1,000 coins, 500, 700 coins. Not all of the cards are going to cost the same. So
exchanged in the event shop for cards, or...
That's neither good or bad. I think that's obviously some cards are going to be better than others. So this is just their way of just like controlling or pushing you towards certain cards that you might want to get first or later on.
Can even unlock dynamic skins for certain...
But the dynamic skins, which is essentially how you like spiff out your deck, is also sharing the same point pool as getting more cards. And I'm not sure whether or not I like this, because you're going to have to choose between whether or not you want to make your cards look good versus whether or not you want more cards. And I think this might be a stake. I would rather they just like give us the option to choose these character animations based on whether or not you've leveled up your player level. I don't like the fact... Actually, I'll just say it now. I don't like the fact that we're sharing the same coin pool between animations and cards. I don't want to choose between having more cards or having the ability to make my characters look good. I think that's stupid.
Cards.
Dynamic
And 4,000 coins. So one of these animations is going to cost the equivalent of at least 4 cards. If you're going to have to choose between whether or not you want 4 cards or an animation.
Those are cards that have moving illustrations, right?
That's right. All character cards can unlock a dynamic skin. After unlocking that, there'll even be a cool bonus animation whenever you cast that character's elemental burst.
Right, so your elemental burst for every single character is not going to have this animation unless you spend 4,000 coins. That's 4 cards at the very least. Maybe like even 5 cards depending on how much they cost.
And if you're confident in your TCG skills, you can also invite a friend to duel.
Yeah, I got a tiny bit confused here. Obviously, they're adding a matchmaking mode to this game.
You can also invite...
But you see here, you can hang your challenge here. Players who see it can accept your challenge. Use your favorite deck to duel players from all over Teapot. So you're not going to have to like actually go into another player's teapot or world just so that you can play a card game with them. This is very good. It means that they're not gimping this game right out of the gate. if you actually had to go into another player's T-bot or world just to play a card game with the game, I can assure you, the vast majority of players in this game are not going to do that. The only players who would do that are like try-hard content creators and a bunch of bored people who want to play the game, but they got bored of the game. So this is very good. They're being smart here. They're not actively trying to kill their own gameplay mode here. But you can see that there's two different options: invite teammate versus match. And what I assumed was that match would be like a random matchmaking, but they pressed invite teammate here.
After reaching,
and they directly went into a matchmaking with another character called Diona. So is Diona like, it says Traveler here. That's not your name. That's actually the canonical name of your player character. And it says versus Diona. So what is this? Is this, you're not inviting a teammate here. You're actually just facing off another canon character called Diona, assuming that Diona has a deck and everything. It's not another player entirely, but it says here that they're like waiting for the character to press yes, probably. So that's very confusing. I'm not sure what's going on here. Invite teammate, doesn't that mean you're supposed to invite somebody that is in your friends list? Why are they going to matchmaking here?
a high enough player level, you'll even unlock a matchmaking.
So I'm not sure whether or not this is finished. And I think the character frame here is actually just to indicate whether or not this is an NPC. So Traveler, Diona, these might just be like stock names that they use at MiHoYo headquarters. So maybe this is like a player character and this is another player character, but it's just represented by like default names and default icons maybe. And yeah, they both have the same card frame.
Making mode. So be sure to give it a try.
Travelers should note that playing against your friends or other travelers won't.
Diluc has a normal attack that costs 1 Pyro Elemental dice and 2 normal dice. During Onslaught, 3 dice, 3 Pyro Elemental, and Dawn. So yeah, when you switch a character, I assume that you get to see, what their abilities are. And this was probably why people thought this game would be more simple than it is at first, which is that it doesn't really show you the abilities of the character cards when you hover over them that much. Like, it seems very simple on the board itself. There's only 3 cards, and I think that's why people were fooled at first. But I'm not ready to make a judgment call on whether or not this level of complexity is still enough to keep people interested.
Won't count towards any leaderboards or provide any
Right, you get to choose who your character is at the start of the game.
rewards. So you can relax. It's all just for fun. Okay, that's everything we have for Genius Invocation TCG, and that brings us to the end of today's special program.
Oh.
So, what did you think?
Why does it have to be over? There's
So yeah, those are just my basic thoughts on where the card game is right now. I'm just not ready to make a judgment call on it before I play it. I'm actually a very casual card game player. I think people are a bit short-sighted when they're saying that, when MiHoYo is saying that this game will be a casual card game. Because what I've noticed is that I don't actually enjoy playing hardcore card games. I don't enjoy the dailies in Hearthstone or Runeterra or MTG Arena, where I have to play against other players and win against them more than anything. Or even do specific things, like you have to play a certain number of cards in a game another player against another player, or even Marvel Snap, to progress in my decks. I am so over the fact that I have to interact with other players to progress in a game. And this is why I'm like of two minds on this. On one hand, I'm like skeptical about the longevity of this game because there is a lack of hardcore or more like competitive elements to this game. But on the other hand, we never really needed this artificial like leaderboard thing in the past, before card games were all online. We could just make this on our own, with our own like score tracking, with our own tournaments beyond what is already in the game. We don't need them to set this shit up for us. On the other hand, when we got to the point where every single like company was doing their own card games and then stuffed all of these features into the game for us, especially linking our progression to playing against other players, I found that I played less of the game eventually. Like right now, I am like 2 weeks into Marvel Snap, but I've already found that I don't want to keep playing the game anymore. I'm no longer doing my dailies because I have to play against other players. And I'm not sure whether or not that will be as bad or worse or better in against NPCs in this game, but at least I don't have to feel like I'm always waiting on other players to make their moves. One good thing about playing against NPCs is that they're just going to make their moves immediately, and it feels like I'm playing according to my will. I don't want to do that, like playing against other players just to progress my deck anymore. And I think this is the correct thing that they are doing, at least in terms of like divorcing player progression and playing against other players. So those are my thoughts on the special program for the card game. I am quite excited for this now that I have seen more of the mechanics, just like a lot of other people. But again, keep your expectations in check. We still don't know how complex or how many variations of decks we can build. Because as we know in the game itself, the fact that they're modeling this game's mechanics, this card game's mechanics, on the combat of the in-game, just the generic combat that we already have for the characters, means that there are certain things that are going to have to fall. I don't know how to explain this, but there is going to be obviously a meta, but the meta has to be wide enough to accommodate enough decks and enough variations of the cards that they use to make this game interesting. And as far as we know, Miho is not interested in balancing anything. There is no way they are going to what is the likelihood that they are going to balance that they released for this card game more than they already do for all of the characters that they've released? I don't think it's very likely. If a card is too OP, are they going to nerf it? They don't nerf anything in this game. This is their first card game, and everything they've done in the meta for Genshin Impact's combat has given us no indication that they are going to balance this card game like any other card game in the game right now. There's no way that they're going to nerf cards after they release. Or maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? Anyways, this is Bench Gamer signing out.